Aeschylus is the oldest surviving ancient Greek tragedian. He is credited with transforming theater from a narration into a depiction of a story. Living through the revolution that established the ancient Athenian democracy and partaking in the city's defense against the Persian invasion, his surviving plays are filled with political and military subjects. Aside from an overall analysis, on this video you will find a summary for each of his 7 surviving plays. Analysis and critique of Aeschylus' plays. There are at least 4 themes worthy of mention and consideration in a prelude to Aeschylus. These are his nationalistic praises of Athens and nationalistic attitude in general. His, seemingly, strong belief in morality and the importance of religion, or honoring the divinities. His portrayal of women or the question of sexism. Lastly, and most important, his defense and love for democracy. It is easy to notice how the plays titled The Persians and the Eumenides make strong and unequivocal eulogies towards Athens. Aeschylus himself fought for Athens in the famous battles of Marathon and Plataea. As such, the play titled The Persians may, perhaps, be a critique of war in a general sense, but it is nonetheless a praise of Athenian martial virtue and accomplishments. In the Eumenides, the focus is not military, rather the city's justice. The city's favor with divinity, more on that when discussing his view of democracy. I should also mention that in the play titled The 7 against Thebes, though the speaker, the main actor, may be of questionable virtue, he nonetheless uses what amounts to religious nationalism to inspire the defense of the city. It seems to me that Aeschylus does not shy away from, rather values, patriotism as a moral virtue. Let the aforementioned segue into his concern with morality and divinity. By all means, Aeschylus is not close to an atheist. Yet, he is also not a common theist. In the 7 against Thebes, cowardly supplications to the gods are derided. Aeschylus seems to argue for the importance of a master piety, borrowing Friedrich Nietzsche's term denoting the good in autonomy and power. However, when the play of Prometheus Bound is considered, the term master morality must be understood in the deepest psychological sense, as the philosopher truly meant it. This latter play is outstanding. I should note that it is not known when, or where, it might have been performed, or how it was received. In my opinion, it could easily have been considered blasphemous. I must declare, it would be very good for humanity to have Prometheus as its god. As with religion, so likewise is Aeschylus with morality. Perhaps a bit conservative, but certainly rational. Plenty of derision of arrogance, envy, and vice in general. Plenty of weight on the value of decorum and ritual. All the while, a surmounting praise of reason, wisdom, criticism, thinking. It can be argued that a similar, seeming, contradiction exists with how he relates the female gender. First, let me mention how the play titled The Suppliant Maidens lost all of its popularity until the 20th century. One of the reasons why the play lost popularity might be because it can be interpreted as man-hating, as odious to manhood. We do not know what occurred in the rest of that trilogy, yet something curious could happen to the interpretation of this play in contemporary culture. In my opinion, in contemporary times, as if from an inverse perspective, this play could be viewed as derogatory towards women. Meaning, presently it seems improper to feature defenseless, impotent, young women that righteous men must protect. In other plays, there are certainly some derogatory comments and observations towards particular women. In the Eumenides, there is one significantly derogatory argument that alleges that men plant an egg in women. Women in turn are mere carriers of the egg. Okay, now for the question of democracy. It is important to note that Aeschylus lived and wrote at the beginning of the Athenian democracy. One would expect this to be a time for as much reverence to Athens and democracy as never again. In the Suppliant Maidens, the male hero, the king of Argos, Pelasgus, is an enlightened monarch who holds a plebiscite. Perhaps another reason for why that play lost favor until the 20th century. Prometheus Bound criticizes and derides monarchy almost as impious, certainly as immoral. I say again, if only Prometheus was humanity's god. In the Eumenides, Athena defends and supports democratic trials. She not only commends Athens as the land of true justice, but also argues that the loser of a democratic trial may always take solace in the fair and reciprocal system of decision-making. I love it! Thoughts on the latter subject engendered in me an idea that I would like to share, anywhere, even though it is not directly related to Aeschylus. With Prometheus bound, one cannot avoid imagining if the details about Greco-Roman religion did not give rise to a scorn for tyranny and desire for democracy. After all, even if Zeus is truly fair, and that is arguable, there is a cycle of kings and divine civil conflicts. The point is, in Judaism and its subsequent offsprings, God is king, the rebel is Satan. Therefore, it would appear, democracy is implied to be bad, as if only the devil would rebel against the king.
In the art of persuasion, a voice without ears is like a painter without eyes.
Some think that religion is how the living favor the dead, but the truth is that religion is how the living favor themselves by the dead.
He who gives advice that he did not follow is the truly wise, for therein lies the proof that he does not merely advertise his talents and achievements, but rather acknowledges his failures and shortcomings.
The more the fallen is envied, the more the jealous enjoy trampling over him.
Those who have suffered calumnies console themselves with the illusion that time reveals everything. Alas, but time only forgets.
Few are satisfied with wealth and pleasure so cheap that they do not cost anyone even a single teardrop.
Aeschylus the Persians. Aeschylus' intent in this play is often debated. Some argue that he either intended to laud the Athenians for their victory against Xerxes and the Persians, a victory in which he himself had taken part as he fought at Salamis and Plataea. Others claim that he wanted to criticize and point out the disastrous and miserable consequences of needless war, at least when perpetrated by a tyrant. Of course, it may be said that the play does both things: deride war, and all the while praise Athens' military virtue. Yet, I believe that at least this part of the tetralogy, as it is, but the surviving portion of 4 plays, does something else. The first scene takes place at the palace of Xerxes in the city of Susa. In the foreground is the tomb of the king's father, Darius. Xerxes himself is not there yet. At first there is only a chorus of elder Persian men. These sing a lamentation about the recent defeat of the Persians at the hands of the combined force of Greek allies. I should note that their references wallow Persian loss, not loss in general. The chorus does this until the mother of Xerxes enters the scene. In her first speech, the Persian queen says something I highlighted as worthy of an aphorism.
Sums of cowardly wealth do court contempt, and indigence quenches ambition's flame.
Ruminating on this deep psychological truth I crafted.
Although undeserving the wealth makes the wealthy disdain the poor, undeserving the poverty makes the poor feel they are unworthy of wealth.
Either way, back to the story. The queen relates a ghastly vision that came to her. In it, there were 2 perfectly beautiful women, one dressed as a Persian, the other as a Dorian, which is a type of Greek. The queen says,
Sisters they were, and inheriting their father's land, one received Greece, the other Asia, to dwell. Then strife arises between them, or so I dreamed, and my son, observing this, tries to check and soothe them, yokes them to a chariot, bridles their necks.
She continues to describe that one of the women would not submit. She casts off her yoke and Xerxes, her son, falls to the ground. An allusion is made as the queen mentions that her deceased husband pitied her fallen son. It should be inferred that the rebellious woman is the Greek one. I wonder whether their sisterhood is to be taken as a slight and subtle criticism of war in general. The queen inquires as to the state of the conflict. The chorus leader tells her that the Greeks are formidable enemies, and then a messenger arrives bearing news of the Persian misfortune. The chorus laments once more, and following the queen's question, the messenger provides a dramatized historical account of the conflict. The following passage is unquestionably a commendation and laudation of Athens.
What? Athens still stands unsacked?
As long as there are men, the city stands secure.
Of course, this is meant to defend Athenian honor, as in reality the people had to abandon their own city for a while. In the meantime, the Persians captured Athens and set it on fire. Yet, of course, the Athenians returned. The details of the war can best be learned from Herodotus, whose writings are also discussed on this channel. Another reference in this account that I found noteworthy was the mention of the small island in front of Salamis. I believe Aeschylus is referencing the island that Aristides is tasked with capturing during the Battle of Salamis. This is explained by Plutarch in his biography of the great and noble Athenian. After the explanation, and some lamentation, the queen makes a rather profound and noteworthy observation.
If one's experienced in troubles, one knows that, when a flood of evil comes, we tend to fear for everything, but when a god provides an easy voyage, we think that fortune's never-changing wind will blow forever.
I am certain that there is an aphorism to be crafted here. How about,
Experience teaches that a raindrop of evil never floods the stream of life, and that a salubrious wind never blows all the way to a promised land.
Either way, the queen basically summons the spirit of Darius. She does so through hymns and incantations, with the aid of the chorus, of course. Although many believe that the Persians are not portrayed as foolish barbarians, I find the way the chorus is fearful of the king, albeit the spirit or ghost of the king is stereotypical of barbarism towards their alleged superiors. Notice how the ghost of the king says to the fearful servants,
"Since this ancient fear obstructs your sense."
Therefore, he turns to the queen. She is not afraid of the spirit, but says something that I also find stereotypical of barbarians.
For while you still beheld the light of sun, you spent your life in enviable happiness, like gods, and now I envy you your dying too, before you had to see this depth of woe.
On the one hand, there is the belief that the tyrant is joyous, and also, contrary to the Odyssey, even among the likes of Achilles, she attests that death would be better than a woeful life. Of course, I do not mean to hate or criticize anyone, but Homer would consider that mentality barbarian. Yet, in other plays, Aeschylus hints at what might have been a dispute or fundamental difference with Homeric morality. The queen informs the ghost of Darius about various historical details, such as the bridge across the Hellespont, and then Darius laments the defeat and loss. He begins by remarking that,
"Never had anyone before made this city Susa so empty and so desolate."
Then Darius describes his and Xerxes' genealogy and ends by saying,
"Of all who've held these powers, none has caused such suffering."
I see two salient points on this discourse. One, though arguable, is a universal criticism of war. The other, fatherly disappointment as the gravest of dishonors and misfortunes. I find this latter interpretation curious, as if it is true, then not only is Aeschylus casting the greatest and most mocking of insults upon Xerxes, but, well, it is proof that this is universally undesired. Darius then relates future events. He reveals that the Persians will also lose a land battle and that few will return across the Hellespont. This makes clear that the events of the play are supposed to be occurring after the naval battle off the coast of Salamis, but before the land battle of Plataea. It makes it possible to anticipate that routed Xerxes will soon appear. Before finally exiting, the ghost of Darius asks that his son be counseled to temper his ambition and ego. He says that,
"Zeus is the chastener of over-boastful minds, a grievous corrector."
At the end of his speech, Darius says something that formulated in my mind an aphorism decrying the improper use of religion. Know that at the end of the series I will show all the aphorisms I crafted from the surviving plays of Aeschylus. After Darius' ghost leaves, and the chorus sings its lamentations, Xerxes arrives alone and destitute. From this point onward there is but a lyric interplay between the king and the chorus. In the Lamentations, the chorus asks about various names of famous Persians, and Xerxes reveals that they are all dead. I do not know what to say about the ending. Basically a lot of lamentations. So, I do not know if this play is merely making fun of the Persians, or also criticizing war in general. It certainly seems to laud the Athenians and deride Xerxes. I think the whole idea of his father being disappointed in him was meant to be a most egregious slap in the face.
The curse of good luck is animosity, while that of bad luck is anonymity.
Aeschylus the Seven against Thebes. This is the third play of a tetralogy accounting the story of Oedipus. The first of the plays was named after his father, Laius, the second after the man himself. Lastly, the current play, The Seven Against Thebes. There was also a so-called satyr-drama titled The Sphinx. Unfortunately, none, or near to none, of any of those satyr-dramas survive. Very little is known about them. The play begins with Eteocles, one of the two sons of Oedipus, speaking before a crowd of Thebans, the chorus. It is clear that he is now the king, and he attempts to muster patriotic courage into the people in defense of the city. I should mention that, in the myth of Oedipus, at least the version that Aeschylus is using, the two sons of Oedipus decided to rule jointly. However, they are not to do so simultaneously, rather they agree to alternate between one-year terms. Thus, it happens that the first to rule, Eteocles, decides not to give up power once his first term expires. I must make clear that they decided the order by way of random selection. Yes, do not let Eteocles' treachery debase the immense value of random selection. O random selection, how you have been forgotten. In that sense, there no longer is a Western world. Either way, back to the story, the two brothers go to war. This is the point of the myth where this play takes place. Meaning, it would be clear to the audience that Eteocles is inspiring his people to fight his own brother's bid for power. He makes various references to the divinities or the gods as emblematic or representative of their society, their collective heritage, their identity. I found that these references to the gods are a major theme of the play. For the time being, I will merely mention that his speech was a curious mixture of clan or nationalistic identity with religion. I mean curious in reference to the current Western world, especially as both those things, especially their mixture, is nowadays considered, at least by me, akin to barbarism. The crowd leaves and a messenger arrives as he tells Eteocles about the incoming foes.
There were 7 men, fierce regiment commanders. They cut bulls' throats into an iron-rimmed shield, and with hands touched the bull's blood, taking their oaths by Ares and Io, and by the bloodthirsty god of terror, either to smash and lay your city level with the ground sacked, or by their death to make a bloody paste of this same soil of yours.
I do not know why it is 7. Be it as it may be, there are also 7 gates to the city. Thus, the messenger counsels or implores the king to set 7 heroes, each at one gate, to fight the 7 monsters. Needless to mention, it is a very suspenseful build-up. As I read it, I could not avoid imagining a possible modern-day movie. Eteocles exits and a chorus of fearful, panic-stricken women enter. These vent their fears in sung verse. I will quote a few representative lines.
I see a cloud of dust sky high and am convinced, a messenger clear and truthful though voiceless. Do you hear or do you not the rattle of shields? When, if not now, shall we hang robes and garlands on your statues, supplicating? O powerful battle-loving daughter of Zeus, save our city palace.
The women beckon aid to many deities, not merely Athena. Eteocles returns and he scolds their cowardice, curiously enough, in particular their slavish supplication to the gods. Here, he begins by saying,
You insupportable creatures, I ask you, is this the best? Is this for the city's safety? Is this enheartening for our beleaguered army? To have you falling at the images of the city's gods crying and howling, an object of hatred for all people with sense? For protection pray that our towers hold off the enemy's spears, that shall be as the gods dispose, but the god, they say, of a captured town desert it.
Needless to mention, this is more civilized. I do wonder, how is this interpreted or viewed at the time? I guess if soon enough the Athenians could laud and prize the likes of Aristophanes, this would not have been seen in a controversial fashion. The chorus does argue against Eteocles, and this one ends up explaining he does not censure honoring and worshipping the gods. He merely wishes the women not to spread fear about the city. It is perhaps useful to know that historically the Athenians had recently passed through a great social fright. Much as the Thebans in the play, they recently had to fear the attacks of the Persian Empire, and some panicked as people do in such fearful moments. Funny enough, at some point, Eteocles says two lines that could easily be interpreted as sexist, derogatory towards women. To make matters worse, there is an aphorism laden within them. Of course, I would hate to insult womankind, but how about?
To the sexist, women may only be arrogant about their humility.
Returning to the play, a messenger arrives with news of the enemy's plans. What ensues is an entertaining enough sequential exchange wherein the messenger describes the foes. He mentions a bit about each's origin, physical peculiarities, special abilities, and armor. At each case, Eteocles responds by describing which hero he will pit against the previously described foe. I could not describe these exchanges in detail. Let's skip to the one that I found the most peculiar or noteworthy. First, let me mention that they each have a name. This whole thing is akin to modern-day superhero epics, though much better, of course. Also, each is attacking one of the 7 gates of the city. Again, I do not know why 7. Lastly, they are each chosen for their task, their gate, by lot, by random selection. Oh, woe be to modern man. No random selection. Okay, at the 6th monster the messenger starts with.
A 6th I'll tell you of, a most modest man greatest in might of battle, yet a prophet, strong Amphiorus at the Homoloian gates.
After mentioning many things about this warrior, the messenger describes his special ability.
He is best not at seeming to be such but being so. Deep indeed is the furrow of his mind from which he gathers fruit, and good the counsels that do spring from it. For him send out, I recommend, wise and good challengers, for he is dangerous who reveres the gods.
Eteocles responds to this with,
Alas, the luck which among human beings can join an honest man with impious ones. In every enterprise is no greater evil than bad companionship.
Eteocles then describes and lauds the hero he has chosen against this enemy. Allow me to merely mention that somehow I harvested around 5 possible aphorisms from this entire passage. Consider.
Humanity's malady, what fools call intellect, is naught but ability motivated by emotion.
Either way, the messenger then reveals that the 7th enemy is none other than Eteocles' own brother, Polynices. The audience is reminded by the messenger's remarks that Eteocles cheated his brother. That having been said, there does not appear to be any denouncement of Eteocles' immorality. Meaning, neither are the hero, neither therefore is truly the villain. Either way, without hesitation, Eteocles declares that he, himself, will meet his brother in martial combat. Further remarks ensue, by all characters, including the chorus of women, wherein the audience is reminded of the myth of Oedipus, at least the version Aeschylus is working with. These are the only things anyone knows about what other things happened in this tetralogy. They mention the fact that Oedipus kills his own father, wedded his own mother, and liberated the city from the man-snatching Sphinx. There is also a mention of Oedipus' curse towards his sons, that lust for power will divide them, and they will kill each other. On this point, the chorus of women plead to Eteocles not to fight, not to go to the 7th gate, not to self-fulfill the prophecy. However, Eteocles refuses and leaves the scene. Both choruses, the male and female, have an interchange as they preoccupy for the fate of the city and discuss the horrors that a conquered people must suffer. After the chorus sings, the messenger arrives declaring that the city is saved from the invading 7 monsters. The chorus rejoices until they hear the news that as prophesied the 2 brothers have killed each other, neither lies. The chorus sings a lamentation that is simply one of the greatest passages of poetry ever penned by any human. Then, the part that allegedly most analysts believe is not part of the original work ensues. A new character, a herald, announces that it has been decreed that Eteocles died valiantly and must be mourned and honored with proper burial. However, the brother, Polynices, has been declared an impious traitor, and he may not be buried. I forgot to mention, both of the bodies have been brought into the stage as the chorus sings its lamentations. Antigone also appears in the scene. Neither her nor her sister, Ismene, are considered to have been in the original play. In response to the herald's words, Antigone proclaims,
"But I to those Cadmean magistrates declare, if no one else will dare to join me in burying him, yet will I bury him and take the danger on my head alone when that is done. His tomb and burying place I will contrive though, but a woman. In the bosom folds of my linen robe I shall carry earth to him."
Needless to mention, if the body is not buried or burned, then wild dogs and birds will tear and ingloriously devour it. It is believed that this ending was added at some point by someone so that it would match with Sophocles' play. Why it would be important that it matches at all? In Sophocles' play, the new king of Thebes, a certain Creon, forbids the burying of Polynices, and in response, Antigone courageously defies the king. The only other thing to comment or insist on is the curious and perhaps controversial cultural dispute between Eteocles, the at least partial hero, and the chorus of women. It appears to me a rather avant-garde section for the time. It is ever daring to criticize any kind of religious attitude, but perhaps not so much at that time in ancient Athens.
Alas, woman would be man's best friend, if dog were not more loyal. Religion triumphed because nothing could defeat the confidence given by the belief in divinity's favor.
Aeschylus' The Suppliant Maidens. Unfortunately, the other three plays in this tetralogy are lost. These were titled The Egyptians, The Danaïdes, and the satyr drama Amymone. The whole were part of what is now a little-known myth. Luckily, the play itself, its principal events and its digressions explain the myth that is being employed or represented in the drama. As a result, the most useful introduction to this work is the fact that the play lost almost complete popularity until the 20th century. Yes, alas, it was forgotten and ignored for almost all of human history. Why? That is perhaps an open question. I think the fact that the play essentially condemns male sexual violence or supremacy might have made it unpopular, except for when it was created and the Romans who preserved it. Also, there is the fact that the principal male hero, the King of Argos, is an enlightened monarch who professes and exercises the importance and value of respecting and following popular opinion. That could not have boded well almost at any time in human history. The play takes place on a so-called sacred grove near ancient Argos. There are altars and statues of the gods and goddesses. The play begins with the chorus, comprised of the suppliant maidens, that is, young women in need of aid or protection, singing about the trials that have brought them to this land. They tell us that all 50 of them, yes 50, were to be forced to marry the sons of a certain Egyptian noble named Aegyptus. This was to take place in Egypt. The maidens mention that they actually descend from Argos, meaning that they are Greeks. They are all sisters, and their mother was none other than Io. You will remember Io as she features at the beginning of Herodotus' histories. I will explain what is relevant about her subsequently. For the time being, while singing of the men who are in all likelihood chasing them, the maidens say,
"By thunder and lightning, by rain winds assailed may they die, before they seize what law forbids, as cousins to mount on unwilling beds."
Likewise, soon after they call on the gods to show their
true loathing of rape.
Perhaps as should be expected, they call upon Athena herself.
The pure daughter of Zeus, who guards sacred walls, may she guard and protect me, virgin, rescuing virgins, may she come in all her power.
In the end, they go as far as threatening, at least by insinuation, that they will hang themselves before allowing their own defilement. On this latter point their father, Danaeus, interjects and pleads prudence and optimism to them. He makes a point that, alas, perhaps, is an inescapable psychological and sociological reality of life.
Boldness never suits the weaker.
I am certain that an aphorism, perhaps many, may be crafted out of the idea. Danaus proceeds to make that curious metaphor regarding birds of prey. Remember, to the Greeks and the Romans the noblest bird was the vulture, as these do not kill other birds. They merely feed on those that have already died.
Bird consumes bird. How could that be pure? And how could a man, taking an unwilling bride from an unwilling father, still be pure?
Unfortunately, the metaphor is lost in modernity, otherwise it could be used for an aphorism. Then Pelasgus, the king of Argos, arrives with a retinue. The first thing he does, jocularly enough, is derogatorily reference the Maidens as barbarians. He quickly mentions the mythic ancestry of Argos. I do believe the details are irrelevant. Then he asks the Maidens to reveal, as he did, from where they hail. At first, he does not believe their reply. Once again, he references their barbarian appearance and even goes as far as saying,
I should even have thought you were the man-hating carnivorous Amazons. Were you armed with bows?
The Maidens continue explaining their heritage, the myth. They mention that their mother, the aforementioned Io, was a priestess of Heros, the wife of Zeus, the king of the gods. So, the myth, as the Maidens have been explaining it, is that Zeus falls for Io, a priestess in Argos. Hera, jealous as is natural, turns Io into a cow. Well, there are several details, but long story made short, eventually Zeus transforms her back to human and impregnates her. The eventual descendants of this divine union are two men named Danaus and the aforementioned Aegyptus. Danaus has 50 daughters, the Maidens, and Aegyptus has 50 boys. Aegyptus, who holds power in Egypt, demands his brother's daughters as wives for his children. The women do not want to marry these boys by force, that is to be raped by them, and Danaus does not want to force his daughters to do what they do not want to do. Thus, they flee to Argos seeking succor. Greek myths are so humorous. Once it is all explained, and Pelasgus accepts the Maidens' ancestry, the chorus leader pleads,
Don't give us back when Aegyptus' sons demand it.
A hard request, to take on a new war.
But justice gives protection to her allies.
Yes, Pelasgus' aid would mean war for Argos against Egypt, or at least the sons of Aegyptus. The conflict must have taken place in one of the two lost plays of the tetralogy. It is on the gravity of this question that Pelasgus demonstrates his commendable rule. He says,
The choice is not easy. Choose me not as judge. I said before that never would I act alone, apart from the people, though I am ruler. So never may people say, if evil comes, by honoring immigrants you destroyed the city.
I wonder, a certain failed presidential candidate could have made a reference to this play against a certain former president that claimed to champion reducing immigration. It is funny as that former president alleged that immigration was bad because some immigrants are bound to be rapists. Ergo, would not the immigrants themselves, on occasion, be fleeing rape? Of course, this is all irrelevant given the current intellectual poverty or inequity in Western civilization. The Maidens warn that if he, or the city, refuses, then they will hang themselves by the altars and statues of the gods. Few could imagine anything more horrid. As the king tells Danaus, the Maiden's father, to make the case before the people, Pelasgus describes the nature of the conundrum. First, the king says,
Wouldn't that be bitter waste, men to bloody the earth for women's sake?
Akin to the Iliad if you ask me. Alas, like perhaps too much conflict in one way or another. But then he says,
Perhaps they may feel pity hating the arrogance of that masculine crowd, and the people may feel more friendly toward you. Everyone is kind to those weaker than themselves.
Both these men leave, the Maidens sing, and when Danaus returns he informs them that the people have voted in their favor, that they will be protected, and that if anyone, foreigner or citizen, attempts to take them by force, they will be stopped and punished. It then happens that a ship is seen approaching the shoreline. A ship that is surely seeking them. Here I noticed something curious. All the while the Maidens have defended womanhood so vigorously, perhaps even virulently. The editor's comments in the introduction claim that the play could, and perhaps was, interpreted for much of history as depicting man-hating women. That the play insults men. I do not see this. Or at least I am not as sensible to such a thing as others might be or have been. The thing is, here there is a strophe by the women that could not at all be qualified as female empowerment or man-hating. It does not seem to fit the others.
Leave us not behind, alone. Farther, I pray, women are nothing alone. No ours is in them, deadly purposed and crafty minds with impure hearts. Just as ravens, they heed no altar.
I reckon much could be imagined about it. Let me merely say that it is peculiar. A new chorus appears, a chorus of Egyptian sailors and a herald, all seeking the maidens. Merely let me quote.
Unless someone agrees and goes on board, that finery you are wearing will be ripped without mercy.
Help, leaders of the city, I am being overpowered.
You there, what are you doing? By what arrogance dare you insult this land of Pelasgian men? Do you think you have come to a woman's land? You are barbarians, and you trifle insolently with Greeks. You've made a mistake, quite lost your mind.
In the end, the sailors and the herald leave threatening to return with war. A chorus of Argive citizens arrives, which joins the chorus of the maidens, and they all sing a song. Allow me to merely mention one single conclusion regarding the popularity of the play. I certainly liked it. Yet, it seems to me entirely possible that in contemporary times, in the 21st century thus far, the play may find an opposite from its previous criticisms or obstacles to popularity. It appears to me that, to a certain degree, a transvaluation of women's and men's sexually pleasing aesthetics and expectations has occurred. Unfortunately, an inquiry on the subject is best saved for another place. Try to remember the idea, though it is a bit nebulous and perhaps controversial.
The strong should be prudent and the weak should be bold.
Aeschylus, Prometheus bound. Although much may be said to introduce this play, to not bias any listener, let me merely make two brief comments. It is not clear if this play was ever performed in public. Likewise, it is believed to be but the first part of a lost tetralogy. So, the play begins with the deities Might, Violence, and Hephaestus as they prepare to shackle Prometheus. From the beginning, Might is pushing, bullying, Hephaestus into carrying out the task that they have been assigned. Might says,
"This is the sin for which he must pay the gods the penalty, so that he may learn to accept the sovereignty of Zeus and quit his human-loving ways."
A mention is made of adamantium, the mythic unbreakable metal. Hephaestus, the crafter of the aforementioned, complains, but accepts. Speaking of Zeus, the god of smithworking even goes as far as saying,
"Every ruler's harsh whose rule is new."
I find Vulcan's attitude jocular. My reaction might be an unintended consequence of knowing about Aphrodite's betrayal, meaning I cannot avoid Venus' betrayal shape my view of Hephaestus. Either way, Hephaestus makes a seeming illusion.
The pain of your present torture will be there always to weigh you down, for he that can relieve it has not yet been born.
Surely the expression is meant to be figurative. Yet, mentioning that someone will be born to rescue Prometheus can be viewed as a foreshadow. I remember that in Aristophanes' piece, or perhaps some other play, a similar thing occurs. So, this would not have been rare or unique in ancient Greek theater. I should mention, while Hephaestus complains, a remark is made that introduces, in a poignant way, what I imagine must have been a rather controversial theme of the play. The deity Might says,
"Everything has its burdens, except ruling over the gods, for only Zeus is free."
To this Hephaestus replies,
"I know, I can see that from this position, I have no reply."
This theme will repeat. Throughout the play, Zeus is criticized. He and other gods are shown in quite a bad light. More will follow. For the time being, let it be known that Hephaestus is an unwilling culprit. Might and Violence, on the other hand, are bad people. The three imprisoning Prometheus leave, and in song the latter laments his fate. Yet, he also praises himself for how he aided humanity. Remember, Prometheus not only granted fire to human beings, a metaphor for reasoning or foresight, but he also created us out of clay. Then the chorus arrives. This one is made of some flying creatures. I do not know how to describe them. Prometheus mentions that they are children of Tethys and Ocean. Both those are titans, deities like Prometheus, older than the Olympians. Later Ocean will make an appearance. From the onset, the flying creatures proclaim their friendship to the prisoner. Their exchange gave me the following proto-aphorism.
The best revenge is a harm so humorous that even the friends of the injured will not resist laughing at his pain.
It arose, in part, from Prometheus' statement.
Now as I hand the playing of the winds, my enemies can laugh at what I suffer.
I do not know if mine is merely a modification, but I mention it because it encapsulates the ideas that are discussed. While criticizing Zeus, Prometheus declares that a day will come when the king has need of him, and that
Then not with honeyed tongues of persuasion will he enchant me, he will not cow me with his threats to tell him what I know, until he frees me from my cruel chains and pays me recompense for what I suffer.
Prometheus even goes as far as saying that as savage as Zeus is,
His will shall melt to soften in due course.
I feel compelled to insinuate some of my final conclusion. There are many reasons to believe that Aeschylus is a big-time lover of democracy. Keep in mind that the democracy in Athens is new at that point in time, and we will talk more about it. The chorus asks Prometheus to explain how he ended up in such a condition, and the Titan replies with what I have for now turned into.
There is pain so painful that speaking it provides no alleviation.
Despite this psychological reality, he goes on to mention that his mother Themis, the Titan goddess of divine law and order, explained to him how Zeus could win the battle against Cronus. Remember that Zeus had to fight his father, and most of the Titans, in order to gain the divine throne. Either way, the point is that it was by Prometheus' aid that Zeus triumphed. However, as the shackled god points out,
This is a sickness rooted and inherent in the nature of tyranny, that the one who holds it doesn't trust his friends.
here once again, we see some proof of my observation. Aeschylus is an unapologetic lover of democracy. Prometheus then explains that Zeus wished to tyrannically destroy the human race. What is more, speaking of the other gods, he says,
No one opposed these plans save I dared.
I wonder, how did a believer reconcile this fact to the love for Zeus? Perhaps such open declarations were interpreted as what we would now call blasphemy, at least by the priests and adorers of Zeus. Prometheus explains what he did to save, or help, the human species. He gave us not only fire, but also false hope. Remember, all had an input into the creation of Pandora, and that portion, perhaps the only good in Pandora, was Prometheus' input. Of course, it is debatable whether false hope is good at all. Either way, to Aeschylus, in this play at least, the Titan is responsible. The deity also claims to have given humans many other things. From all the crafts and arts, to the domestication of animals, to reason itself, or at least foresight. You have got to love Prometheus, at least Aeschylus Prometheus. I should mention two heavy, most worthy, possible aphorisms ensued. The chorus leaves and the Titan Ocean enters. This one begins his song by expressing his high esteem and friendship for the tortured. He advises Prometheus to be quiet, to be humble, to be serviceable. He says that he will try and help him, that he will try to convince Zeus to be lenient with him. This Titan goes as far as saying things such as,
For that tongue of yours which talked so high and haughty, you are not yet humble. Still you do not yield to your misfortunes. Don't you know that a thoughtless tongue is subject to correction?
Prometheus responds, rejecting the Titan's aid. With fury, he requests him to avoid any involvement. Ocean, at one point, replies,
By nature, you're much better at advising others than yourself.
Of course, most deep thinkers hold this to be an unavoidable byproduct of intellect. As one thing is understanding, and therefore counseling, another is one's self-doing. Aside from these clear and possible aphorisms, the discussion between Ocean and Prometheus yielded, to my eyes, a critical psychological observation. Alas, it would take too long to explain here. It just occurred to me.
The temperate are merely those that are most susceptible or receptive to the sound of their own voice.
In part, this sentence aphorism encapsulates the insight. I should mention that another aphorism came out of this discussion rather instantaneously.
To the wise, for the most part, it is wise to seem foolish.
Although in the final video of the series you can hear all of the aphorisms I crafted as a result of all of Aeschylus's plays, I am including the prior because, if masticated sufficiently, they should explain what is discussed at this section of the play. Ensuing, ocean leaves, and the chorus re-enters. By the insistence of the latter, Prometheus proclaims some more of the gifts he bestowed mankind. Among these are things such as medicine and the art of prophecy, meaning knowledge of how to read entrails and the various elements of that now lost art. It then happens that Prometheus alludes to fate, the inescapable future. Upon questioning, he says that Zeus
also cannot escape what is fated.
This is important to keep in mind. In Greco-Roman religion, even the gods were subject to the will of the fates. I find that the implicit rejection or dilution of free will entailed in this concept is not referenced enough in modernity. Either way, the chorus insists that Prometheus reveal the will of the fates. However, he refuses to do so, as that is the way he may coerce Zeus into granting him freedom. Then enters already transformed into a cow. This is the same that features at the beginning of Herodotus' histories and the ancestor of the Suppliant Maidens, the previous play. She does not recognize or does not know Prometheus, but he does recognize her. He expected her to make an appearance and counts her among the tyrannical affronts of the gods. In this case by Hera, Zeus' wife. Asks Prometheus to inform her about her own fate. Prometheus is reluctant, but the chorus insists, asking her to describe her past and the Titan to describe her future. I will skip the details. At one point the chorus leader says to a reluctant Prometheus,
"Speak, tell us to the end, for the sick it is sweet to know beforehand clearly the pain that still remains."
I must say, from this point onward the chorus seems like the stereotypical fan of poverty or misery dramas. It is funny. After Prometheus tells much of her future, she contemplates suicide. Prometheus enlivens her spirit by telling her that eventually her suffering will end, and that in fact it is he who has to wait the longer. After her questions, he tells her that Zeus's
own light-witted decisions will undo him.
Yes! In fact, it will be a descendant of herself that will dethrone Zeus in no shorter time than 13 future generations. He continues by telling her that eventually Zeus will turn her back into a human. Then he describes the fate that leads to the Suppliant Maidens. In particular, that one will not kill her husband, but give birth to a child. Meaning, one will not be truly raped, but rather will fall in love. The child of this one will be the renowned hero known as Hercules. This hero will set Prometheus free, or otherwise, Zeus will blunder and eventually lose his throne. I gather that the evil gadfly sent by Hera stings and she exits the scene in pain and spasm. Of the subsequent description of the future deity that will oust Zeus, let me merely quote the following.
Such is the wrestler that Zeus is setting up against himself, a monster hard to fight. This enemy shall find a fire to best the lightning bolt, a thunderclap to excel the thunderclap of Zeus. And he shall shatter Poseidon's trident, with quakes on sea and land. So, in his crashing fall shall Zeus discover how far apart are rule and slavery.
The chorus points out that Zeus will surely increase the intensity of the torture in order to force him into revealing his knowledge. At this moment enters Hermes with the intent of conveying just such a message or warning. Prometheus responds to Hermes' opening statements with great derision and, perhaps, blasphemous observations. There is something unfortunate that I must quote.
Be sure of this, when I measure my misfortune against your slavery, I would not change.
It is better, I suppose, to be a slave to this rock than Zeus's trusted messenger.
Thus should one insult the insolent.
Alas, a line or more are missing. We do not know exactly how one should insult the insolent. Oh, the tragedy. I cannot but merely imagine the loss of the most precious aphoristic gem. I can only take solace in the fact that there has been, and follow, many such gems. Okay, long story made short, Hermes warns Prometheus, but the latter courageously rejects. I should mention that at one point, Prometheus says,
"There is no disgrace in suffering at an enemy's hand when the hate is mutual."
Alas, I cannot avoid concluding or feeling that in fact the very opposite is true.
Suffering from another's hand is disgraceful if, and only if, The hatred is mutual.
Behaving like an immature child, Hermes says that Prometheus is crazy. The chorus proves me wrong as, unlike the typical fans of misery dramas, they choose to stay with Prometheus, keep him company, and endure with him the collateral damage of Zeus' incoming punishment. Hermes' leaves and thunders are heard in the background. As for a conclusion, let me say that I find it not entirely unbelievable that this play might never have been performed in public. I would imagine many would have found issue with it. Perhaps Aeschylus wrote it, many read it, perhaps it was performed privately, but not in the open, certainly not during the festival of Dionysus. Sure, the likes of Aristophanes' Plutus is quite anti-clerical and it insults Zeus, but not like this one. Regardless, one thing is clear, Aeschylus loves democracy and hates monarchy or tyranny. You have got to love the man.
If people were satisfied with good luck and miracles, deserve would not have been invented. Since being self-critical is essential for wisdom, the truly wise is a herald, not an example of wisdom.
Aeschylus Agamemnon, part 1 of 3 of the Orestia. This is the first part of a tetralogy that nearly completely survived. Only the last part, the satyr drama, is missing. It has ever been regarded among the highest of masterpieces. To understand it or to not be taken aback by it, one must know the myth of the Trojan War. As such, I will be explaining the relevant portions as the story unfolds. The play begins with a herald, standing on top of a tower, beckoning the queen to reveal her newfound knowledge about the capture of Ilium, Troy. A chorus shows up and sings a brief description of the war. They say that 10 years have passed since the war began, which should confirm to the audience that Agamemnon will soon return to his homeland. They also mention how the king sacrificed his own daughter. On this they say that
Her supplications and her cries to her father were in vain. Likewise were the child's lamentation to kings passioned for battle.
Let me explain. Before going to Troy, to obtain favorable winds during the voyage, Agamemnon is forced to sacrifice his own child daughter. Clytemnestra, the queen and mother of the child, did not approve. All in the audience would have known that she never forgave Agamemnon. If you do not know this, the subsequent events would be very surprising. If you wish, you may learn more details about this barbaric sacrifice and its consequences from Euripides' plays. The chorus also says,
Justice tilts her scale so that those only learn who suffer. And the future you shall know when it has come. Before then, forget it.
I would like to express the latter concept as,
the future is always remembered only after it has already happened. Before then, it is simply yet to be forgotten.
The chorus continues,
As it was said of old, may the dawn child be born to be an angel of blessing from the kindly night.
I quote these lines because not only are they proto-aphorisms, but I feel that they subtly foreshadow the plot of the trilogy. The first in events, the second in theme. Clytemnestra enters the scene. It is in fact disputed by experts when exactly she does this. Either way, she says she knows of the fate of the warriors in Troy. The chorus asks her how she knows, and she references a divine message. Then the following exchange establishes her, disputably, commendable character.
Is it dream visions, easy to believe you credit?
I accept nothing from a brain that is dull with sleep.
The charm, then, of some rumor that made rich your hope?
Am I some young girl, that you find my thoughts so silly?
In briefer sense, Clytemnestra is not a naive woman. One may argue that she is in fact too astute in the wrong way. Alas, some men would scorn and find her fit for punishment. Long story made short, Clytemnestra knows what happened at Troy. She describes it by the chorus insistence. There is yet another reference to random selection as the soldiers partition the loot by chance. Clytemnestra also references the often forgotten moral message of the myth.
And if they reverence the gods who hold the city and all the holy temples of the captured land, they, the despoilers, might not be despoiled in turn. Let not their passion overwhelm them. Let no lust seize on these men to violate what they must not.
Afterwards, on the same theme, she says,
Such are the thoughts you hear from me, a woman merely. Of all good things to wish this is my dearest choice.
The chorus leader commends her for speaking
graciously like a prudent man.
This latter point would confuse anyone that does not already know the story. Throughout the play, Clytemnestra acts as a most virtuous, pious, and loving wife. The chorus sings various aphoristic boulders, all of whom are of an ethical essence. So as to not digress, let me merely mention that at one point they reference Paris' abduction of Helen. Of this they say,
She took to Ilium her dowry, death.
You have to keep in mind that the myth is also a moral warning to women. Like this play, I do not know if it argues that women are bad, relative to men, but it certainly warns them about moral folly also. Continuing this line of thought, the chorus reiterates the moral message to men. It not only condemns death for the sake of women, but also,
The gods fail not to note those who have killed many. There among the ciphers there is no more comfort in power, and the vaunt of high glory is bitterness. Let me attain no envied wealth. Let me not plunder cities, neither be captured in turn, and face life in the power of another.
In Homer's epic, Achilles expresses the same ideas. Achilles derides seeking honor or glory, and he complains about war. I know that in modernity many hold the view that it is correct not to teach the Iliad and the Odyssey to children. They believe that those books engender dreams of glory and of violent attitude. It seems to me that whoever argues those things has never actually read the books. Of course, on this channel you may learn about Homer's poems. A herald arrives rejoicing at his return to his homeland and confirming that Agamemnon is soon to follow. This herald is questioned by the chorus leader on his trials and journey. He describes mainly the hardships of ancient sea travel. He does say a rather finished aphorism.
Who, except the gods, can live time through forever without any pain?
That is a nice thought to always keep in mind. Clytemnestra then, once again, proclaims her longing, loyalty, and love for Agamemnon, so convincingly that the herald states,
A vaunt like this, so loaded as it is with truth, it well becomes a high-born lady to proclaim.
The herald then explains that he does not know of the fate of the other heroes. As would have been well known to the audience, all had their problems. To these insinuations the chorus says,
Who is he that named you so fatally in every way? Could it be some mind unseen in divination of your destiny shaping to the lips that name for the bride of spear and blood? Helen, a hell on earth.
I like this translation. The chorus then speaks of Paris. It makes an analogy with raising a lion that once grown devours its adopted parents. The chorus says,
This thing they raised in their house was blessed by God to be priest of destruction.
The subsequent messages of the song are not entirely clear to me. What seems beyond doubt is a metaphoric, allegoric, analogical discourse on the potential betrayal and thirst for power natural to children in relation to their fathers. Perhaps it is no longer common. Then again, perhaps modern psychologists have an agreed upon term for it, and it is more ubiquitous than I imagine. The issue is, do children, boys, naturally wish to overcome their fathers? I could quote much of the passage, alas, a full explanation, analysis, and introspection would require its own treatise. Let me merely quote.
Disasters stamped in the likeness of their fathers, but righteousness still shines out in the smoke of mean houses. Her blessing is on the just man.
So, as some inherit vice, others may inherit goodliness. Riding a chariot, Agamemnon enters with Cassandra beside him. It would have been well known that Cassandra, although she was raped by lesser Ajax as she supplicated in the temple of Athena, was afterwards taken by Agamemnon as part of his loot. Know that Athena, the goddess, is ever angry at those who conquered Troy because they did not punish Ajax. Anyways, the chorus hails or greets Agamemnon, and he in turn mentions various things about his trials and journey. Most memorable is a slight digression of the almost ubiquitous presence or malady of envy. He basically says that of all his friends or companions, the only one that was clear of such vice or emotive infection was Odysseus, who sailed unwillingly. Clytemnestra then, once again, lies convincingly about her love for Agamemnon. She begins by saying that she is not ashamed to proclaim her love even though,
in the lapse of time, modesty fades. It is human.
This is something to be inquired upon. Either way describes her trials as she, allegedly, waited faithfully for her husband. She says,
"If you had died each time that rumor told your death, you must have been some triple-bodied Gyrian. The rippling springs that were my tears have dried utterly up.
From this I crafted."
Those that have truly suffered envy those that may still shed tears.
The queen then explains how, in the king's absence, various contenders and traitors have arisen. Therefore, allegedly, for the sake of security, his son, Orestes, is away at the moment. She mentions a series of metaphors to describe her alleged happiness. Consider the lines.
Land seen by sailors after all their hope was gone. Splendor of daybreak shining from the night of storm. The running spring a parched wayfarer strays upon.
At the end, she has a servant lay out a red carpet for the king. Agamemnon responds by insisting that he should not be treated as an Asian king. Clytemnestra pretends she cannot avoid adulating him until, together, they enter the palace, exit the scene. The chorus sings a song wherein they basically proclaim a bad feeling, as if something ominous was in the air. They make a mention of Asclepius, who they claim even brought the dead back to life. Yet, the gods ordained
that fate should stand against fate to check any man's excess.
Clytemnestra then re-enters the scene and directs herself to Cassandra, who has remained sitting on the chariot this entire time. She tells Cassandra to go inside the palace, but the girl of prophetic vision does not move or respond to her commands. Clytemnestra promises her that she will treat her nicely, but still Cassandra does not acknowledge her. In the end, the soon treacherous queen and the chorus agree that Cassandra must be an uncomprehending barbarian. Yet, as soon as the queen exits, and as the chorus pities her, Cassandra begins a lyrical lamentation. She beckons the name of Apollo in agony, and the chorus mentions her prophetic power. More on that soon. They tell her to not fear the house of the Atridae, but she answers with,
"No, but a house that God hates, guilty within of kindred bloodshed, torture of its own, the shambles for men's butchery, the dripping floor."
Exactly what she is referencing will be explained later, but the audience would have known about it beforehand. Cassandra mentions various things to be deciphered as if she were in a trance. The chorus merely replies,
"I am not proud in skill to guess at prophecies, yet even I can see the evil in this thing."
Eventually, Cassandra gets back her lucidity and says that she will not prophesize like a
young girl new married glance from under veils.
I like the metaphor. Anyways, by her clear references, she convinces the chorus that she knows the future, though this is not yet explained. Again, the audience would have known it. The chorus stands amazed, and she explains her personal history. She describes how, despite the fact that the god blessed her with the gift of prophetic vision, she nonetheless lied and rejected Apollo's amorous proposal. Thus, in retribution for unrequited love, Apollo cursed her so that none would ever believe her power. None would ever believe her knowledge of the future. Most consequential is the fact that she foresaw the treachery behind the large wooden horse. I should mention, she is one of Priam's daughters, the now dead king of Troy. Cassandra then reveals Clytemnestra's true intentions. She says of her,
"What can I call her and be right? What beast of loathing, viper double-fanged, or siller which hold in the rocks and bane of men that range the sea, smouldering mother of death to breathe relentless hate on those most dear. This is the woman lioness, who goes to bed with the wolf, when her proud lion ranges far away. As a wife mixing drugs she wills to shred the virtue of my punishment into her bowl of wrath as she makes sharp the blade against her man."
I feel obliged to admit, in the previous play I mocked the chorus for enjoying a misery drama. Yet, alas, I feel a bit of that pleasure myself with this story. It is not hard to wonder why people liked it. Of course, every person would view it from their own personal angle. In the end, Cassandra also announces that her and Agamemnon's death will be avenged by Clytemnestra's own child. Lamenting her fate, Cassandra goes into the palace, and soon enough Agamemnon's cries are heard from within. The chorus debates as to what to do, whether they should go in right away or gather the citizens before storming the place. Before they make up their mind, the doors open and Clytemnestra is revealed holding a dagger as she stands over the bloody, dead bodies of Cassandra and Agamemnon. The latter begins explaining herself with,
Much have I said before to serve necessity, but I will feel no shame now to unsay it all. How else could I, arming hate against hateful men disguised in seeming tenderness, fence high the nets of ruin beyond overleaping?
I must say, there is an aphorism buried within this asseveration. In the end, the queen says she is happy with what she has done. She considers it glory. The chorus stands in disbelief and chastises her as arrogant. She defends herself, claiming that she is not a mere vain woman with a fluttered heart. She goes on to justify herself by reference to her daughter's execution. As for killing Cassandra, she says killing his husband's lover adds spice to her delight. LOL. What ensues is a song between her and the chorus wherein the most memorable mentions are that of Zeus as the prime mover.
For what thing without Zeus is done among mortals?
Her following lines yielded,
Not even your own children shall drop honest tears on top of your grave.
Then enters Aeschylus, Agamemnon's cousin. The audience would have known his role in this myth, but he explains it anyways. First, he rejoices at Clytemnestra's deed with things such as,
Now I can say once more that the high gods look down on mortal crimes to at last vindicate the right.
Let me explain. Agamemnon and Aeschylus were cousins. Their fathers, Atreus and Thyestes respectively, had fought over the throne of Mycenae. Long story made short, Atreus killed some of Thyestes' children and secretly served them in a meal to the father. You can imagine why Aeschylus considers Agamemnon's murder justified. By the way, if you did not know, the Trojan War is a story of barbarity. Its moral lessons were never meant as characters to emulate. The chorus condemns Aeschylus and Clytemnestra and threatens them with the people's vengeance, as these would not allow the reign of a couple of tyrants, undeserving rulers. Oh yeah, Thyestes and Clytemnestra are not only lovers but in cooperation. Aeschylus tells the chorus,
You are old men, well, you shall learn how hard it is, at your age, to be taught how to behave yourselves, but there are chains, there is starvation with its pain, excellent teachers of good manners to old men, wise surgeons and exemplars.
If Aristophanes' jokes about violent younglings is a sign of moral precepts, this makes Aeschylus into a very bad person. Anyways, a brawl is on the verge of ensuing, but Clytemnestra calms the tensions, imploring no more violence. The chorus references Orestes, Agamemnon's son, future revenge, and the play ends with the following, in my opinion, jocular exchange.
Crow and strut, brave cockerel by your hen. You have no threats to fear.
Do not heed their empty yapping. Come now, dearest, you and I have the power. We too shall bring good order to our house at least.
Remember, this is only the first part of a trilogy. Make sure to watch the next video if you want to see what happens next.
People are timid in the morning, daring in the midday, regretful in the afternoon, and acceptant at nightfall. No doubt it is the sophists or scientists, not the philosophers, who are the wise, as even life or God itself charges a cost for all its lessons.
The Libation Bearers. This play is the second in the trilogy regarding Orestes. Remember that in the prior the mother of Orestes kills his father, Agamemnon. As a result, this play begins with Orestes lamenting over his father's grave. He wallows about not having been present at his death. As he speaks, a chorus of women, with his sister Electra, enter the scene. Orestes and his yet-to-speak companion Pylades conceal themselves nearby enough so as to overhear what these women say. The chorus sings a lamentation describing the essential facts of the prior play. When Electra speaks, she asks the chorus for counsel on what she should say, what she should supplicate, as she makes a libation to her father's grave. The ceremony consists of pouring wine on the ground. The chorus tells Electra to implore the aid or good fortune of all who hated Aegisthus, Clytemnestra's new lover. Specifically, to implore the coming of a man, a Superman, that will avenge Agamemnon's death. On this point, Electra asks,
I can as this, and not be wrong in the gods' eyes.
The chorus leader replies,
Of course, to hurt your enemy when he struck first.
This exchange basically alludes or foreshadow the coming theme and development of the story. It is funny as the whole is basically an inquiry on the morality or valuation of revenge. More on that later. Electra makes her libation, and she also complains about her own misfortune and the injustice of her own mother and new lover.
We have been sold, and go as wanderers because our mother bought herself, for us, a man, Aeschylus, he who helped her hand to cut you down. Now I am what a slave is, and Orestes lives outcast from his great properties, while they go proud in the high style and luxury of what you work to win.
Then, she notices someone has left a strand of hair on Agamemnon's tomb. To be clear, this would be a most sympathetic offering. As the chorus asks her why she is surprised, Electra mentions that the hair could be her own, that it must be Orestes, her brother. He has been missing for some time, and she does not know if he is safe. I found the following declaration most noteworthy.
The bitter wash has surged upon my heart as well. I am struck through, as by the cross stab of a sword, and from my eyes the thirsty and unguarded drops burst in a storm of tears like winter rain, as I look on this strand of hair.
What I call an aphorism could be made with this, but it will take some thought. Electra also notices footprints, whose size further convinces her that Orestes must have made a visit. At that point, the latter comes forward from his place of concealment. Electra does not initially recognize him, which segues a jocular exchange wherein Orestes reveals his identity through insinuations. Once he admits his identity, Electra says,
All the love I could have borne my mother turns your way.
After their subsequent rejoicing, Orestes describes how a prophet speaking for Apollo has tasked him with enacting vengeance for his father's assassination. I found this funny not only because it is a verification that the gods approve of vengeance, but also because if I remember correctly, Apollo sided with the Trojans. Should he not rejoice at Agamemnon's assassination? Anyways, Orestes also mentions that he was warned that if he does not, or fails to, enact his vengeance, then he will be punished by the god. Basically, his hands are tied by divinity to that which he would most wish to do anyways. LOL. On top of that, he mocks Aegisthus, his mother's new lover, for having the heart of a woman. I found this curious as there does not seem to be any justification or elaboration for the intended derisive analogy. The chorus, Orestes, and Electra sing a song in which revenge is justified. The chorus starts with,
Let hate be a word fulfilled, the spirit of right cries out aloud and extracts atonement due. Blood stroke for the stroke of blood shall be paid, who acts, shall suffer, so speaks the voice of the age-old wisdom.
The song continues with Orestes and Electra basically daydreaming about a different fate and destiny. That would be common to all sufferers. Skipping ahead, Electra sings a jocular line.
For we are bloody like the wolf and savage born from the savage mother.
It seems out of a heavy metal song, LOL. At last, no longer singing, Orestes asks, as if to the spirit of his father, for permission to take the throne. Electra in turn asks for their future murder to go without repercussion. They implore for the spirit of Agamemnon to appear, but it does not. Instead, for some reason, the chorus mentions a dream that Clytemnestra once had. They explain that in the dream Clytemnestra gave birth to a snake-like monster. She in turn treated it as a child and even gave it milk from her breast. On this, the point is made that it was milk with blood as the monster tore her flesh. After this story, Orestes expresses his hopes that the dream is a prophecy that foreshadows his future actions. He says,
I turn snake to kill her. This is what the dream speaks loudly.
This is some rather edgy drama. Brother and sister gathering the strength to kill their mother. Orestes tells Electra and the chorus to go back and to speak to no one about their intentions. He in turn, disguised as an outlander, with the aid of his friend Pylades, will go and carry out the deed himself. All these characters exit the scene and the chorus sings about tragedy itself. Yes, for example, it says,
"But who can recount all the high daring in the will of man, and in the stubborn hearts of women the all-adventurous passions that couple with man's overthrow?"
They exemplify that thought by referencing various tragedies. I could not possibly explain these in detail, as this is intended to be a short summary. Consider how one of the references is to the island of Lemnos. This is described in Herodotus' 5th book, which you may also learn on this channel. Let me move past this section of the play by mentioning that the end of the song yielded a very nice aphorism.
Fairness may be the anvil, but envy is the hammer that forges the blade of vengeance.
Of course, this is far from Aeschylus' writing. The sentence was merely engendered by it. Regardless, I love it. Back to the play, Orestes and Pylades enter the scene. The former knocks on the door of the palace and tells an answering voice that he is a stranger bearing news. Clytemnestra appears. Orestes lies to her in saying that he is a traveler and that in his travels someone asked him to deliver some news to the king and queen of Argos. The news is supposed to be that Orestes himself is dead. Clytemnestra pretends to be sad as in the previous play. She asks for the disguised Orestes and his friend to be given hospitality and for Aeschylus to be called so that he may hear the news himself. The queen exits the scene and soon enough a new character, a nurse or maid, enters. This one expresses in lamentation the love she had for the now dead Orestes. A child, she claims, she raised on her own. She says this unbeknownst to her, to the very man whose death she is lamenting. In the passage, she also makes clear the queen's, the mother of Orestes, true feelings. She says of her,
"She put a sad face on before the servants, to hide the smile inside her eyes over this work that has been done so happily for her."
In the end, she reproaches the new master of the house, Aeschylus. Perhaps because of all her lamentations, the chorus takes the liberty of insisting to this nurse to bring the king without the company of any armed guards. The nurse is not told exactly why, but she agrees to do it under the suggestion that it will redeem her current wallows. The nurse leaves and the chorus sings what I gather to be a long-winded prayer for Zeus' aid in the coming struggle. After the song, Aeschylus enters the scene unarmed and alone. He pretends sorrow at the news, goes inside the dwelling wherein he expects to speak to the travelers, and soon enough a cry of pain is heard from within. A follower of Aeschylus shows up declaring sorrowfully the death of the tyrant. Clytemnestra appears and answering her inquiry, the follower says,
"I tell you, the living are being killed by the dead ones."
To this the queen replies,
"So, you speak in riddles, but I read rhyme. We have been one with the treachery by which we slew."
I liked that exchange. Orestes threatens his own mother with death. This one pleads for her life by references to pity and motherly love. Orestes asks his friend for advice, and the latter replies what I have turned into.
He who is false to his oaths fears mortal men more than he fears God.
LOL, the same idea and an allusion to the subsequent events is invoked in the exchange.
Take care, your mother's curse, like dogs, will drag you down.
How shall I escape my father's curse, if I fail here?
Remember, Orestes swore vengeance on his father's grave. Thus, upon Orestes' refusal, Clytemnestra calls him the snake from her aforementioned dream, and Orestes replies by asserting the justice of vengeance, its fairness. Pylades helps Orestes take Clytemnestra into the palace. The chorus sings about the righteousness of the deed. Then the doors of the palace open to reveal Orestes standing over the dead, bloody corpses of Aeschylus and Clytemnestra. There are attendants besides displaying the bloody net-like garment or robe with which Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon. To be clear, the queen had used the garment to hold back the king's face as she sawed his throat. Regardless, the juxtaposition of the images, how she was revealed over the corpses of Agamemnon and Cassandra, how he is now revealed over the bodies of Clytemnestra and Aeschylus, it is all meant to be quite striking. And I cannot simulate it with my limited knowledge of computers. LOL. Orestes presents the bodies to the audience in derision and, among other things, says,
They swore together death for my unhappy sire and swore to die together. Now they keep their oath.
Orestes tells the servants to display the garment, and what ensues basically introduces the theme and many of the events of the next play. Orestes says that for
Aegisthus' death I take no count, he has his seducer's punishment, no more than law.
As for his mother, he says a lot of things. In the end he says,
May no such partner as she was come to live with me, sooner, let God destroy me, with no children born.
His main moral defense is that the seer, the prophet, told him that Apollo commanded it. Nonetheless, soon enough, Orestes begins, freaking out. He speaks of otherwise invisible Gorgons, wearing black robes, covered with snakes, haunting him. These are the Furies. Much scarier in description than in any painting. At one point, Orestes says,
Lord Apollo, how they grow and multiply, repulsive for the blood drops of their dripping eyes.
Orestes thus leaves the scene running in fear, and the chorus sings a brief summary of the tale thus far. Remember, this is the middle portion of a trilogy. If you don't know how Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon, or if you wish to know what is going to happen to Orestes now that the Furies are haunting him, then either watch the prior or the next video.
Turning lead into gold is not a daydream. No, rather daydreams are lead turned to gold.
The Eumenides. You must remember that this is the third and last part of Aeschylus' surviving trilogy. If you did not watch the videos outlining the plays titled Agamemnon and Libation Bearers, then go check them out. This play begins in Delphi, in front of the sanctuary of Apollo. The priestess sings a song that, in part, pleads for the god's vision. She enters the sanctuary and then comes out crawling on all fours as she says,
"Things terrible to tell and for the eyes to see."
She describes the Furies along with the horrors of Tartarus, the most horrid place in Hades. After she leaves, the doors of the temple open and Orestes is revealed surrounded by the Furies, Apollo and Hermes. The Furies, however, are not haunting him, they are sleeping. Apollo speaks encouraging Orestes, pledging his support and explaining that it is he who laid the Furies to sleep. Then he instructs the hero to travel to the citadel of Pallas, the Acropolis in Athens, where he will find a judge, the goddess herself, who may acquit him of his guilt. Remember that it was Apollo that commanded him to kill. The god ends by instructing Hermes to care and guide Orestes to the Acropolis. Then all exit the stage and the spirit of Clytemnestra enters. Among other things, she says,
"Eyes illuminate the sleeping brain, but in the daylight man's future cannot be seen."
I do not know what so attracted me to these lines. There is an aphorism buried within them that, alas, in modernity, with its science and its alleged culture, would no longer be commendable. Anyways, the ghost, she references herself as the dream, tries to wake up the sleeping Furies. In doing so, she complains about her fate and the immorality of her son's murder. All the while the Furies wrestle and groan in their sleep. Near the end she says,
"Sleep and fatigue, two masterful conspirators, have dimmed the deadly anger of the mother snake."
These lines most make the Furies shrill in their sleep. Clytemnestra's spirit continues with,
"The beast you are after is a dream, but like the hound whose thought of hunting has no lapse, you bay him on."
Eventually the Furies do wake up. These proceed to sing as a chorus, and in their song, they complain about the new generations of gods, especially Apollo. The latter soon enough shows up and chases them out of his sanctuary, his home. He says something that yielded in my mind, for the time being.
Insult. No god is affectionate enough to include you in his flock.
I guess this is one of the themes of the play. How can the new gods relate with the elder divinities, such as the Furies? An argument ensues between the Furies and Apollo that foreshadows or elucidates the moral or legal conundrum. The Furies hold that Orestes must be punished for the most impious, immoral of bloodsheds, his mother's. Apollo argues that the Furies should focus on punishing Clytemnestra for killing her husband, Agamemnon. He has it that Orestes' deed was justified. The Furies do not agree. They claim that a wife killing a husband is not as bad as Orestes killing his own mother because, they argue, wife and husband are not truly kin. They do not share blood. This conundrum is a main theme of the play. I guess I can make my own foreshadow. The other theme of the play amounts to a nationalistic eulogy towards the city of Athens. It was unexpected and funny. Either way, Apollo convinces the Furies to let Athena, Pallas, rule a judgment on the matter. The scene changes and Orestes is revealed kneeling, hugging, and pleading at the feet of Athena in the Acropolis, the legendary home of the wise sister of Apollo. I really like the whole idea behind the play. Soon enough, the chorus of Furies arrives and says,
"See there, he clings to defense again, his arms winding the immortal goddess image, so seeks acquittal out of our hands. It shall not be, his mother's blood spilled on the ground cannot come back again. It is all soaked and drained into the ground and gone."
A long and ultimately inconsequential exchange ensues in which the Furies haunt Orestes and he attempts to defend the justice or fairness of his deed. Like in the discussion with Apollo, brief remarks are made wherein the Furies arrogantly argue in favor of their own existence, their moral importance. They say, for example,
"Privilege primeval yet is mine."
Athena shows up claiming that she was busy doing good things for the Athenians when the ruckus brought her over. She says,
Who are you? I address you all alike, both you, the stranger kneeling at my image here, and you, who are like no seed ever begotten, not recognized by the gods as goddesses, nor yet stamped in the likenesses of any human form.
Thus, each side explains themselves to Athena. Orestes says that he killed the woman that in turn had killed the very hero that the goddess aided in destroying Ilium, the city of Troy. Athena then resolves to hold a democratic trial. I love it! The Chorus of Furies sings a song wherein, among other things, they mention that if the precedent is set, the future will not be safe for parents. It reminded me of Aristophanes' seeming obsession with sons that beat their own parents. I guess that might have been an issue in the past. LOL. Along the same song, I apparently found the following lines noteworthy.
"There is advantage in the wisdom won from pain. If the man rears a heart that nowhere goes in fear, how shall such a one any more respect the right?"
I guess there is an aphorism to be dug and sculpted. My first thought about it is rather fascistic. Not that such a thing would make it not an aphorism. I will provide the final answer at the end of the video. For the time being, consider how the subsequent words yielded.
The vainer the hostess that shame impregnates, the more odious the revenge that is birth.
That describes an unequivocal pattern in humans. By the way, several more aphoristic boulders ensued. Yay. Okay, back to the story. So, I found curious that the jury that Athena assembles is comprised of 12 persons. What is this? Is this a modification by some later copier? Why would it be 12 as in oligarchical systems? Why not 500? Is this a point of Aeschylus? He has shown such love for democracy. I think this was a later change. The trumpet calls and all assemble. Apollo shows up to speak as a witness in the defense of the accused. Athena points out that the accusers must speak first. A jocular exchange occurs when Orestes does not deny having committed the murder. The Furies say,
"There are 3 falls in the match, and one has gone to us."
Orestes replies,
"So you say, but you have not even thrown your man."
This must have been a common reference in Greek life. Obviously, they are referencing the sport of wrestling. Either way, the Furies make their case. Then Apollo speaks and he argues that the Furies' premise is in fact mistaken. He argues that females are mere recipients of male seed, that in fact the child is only the man's. As evidence for this, he invokes Athena's birth. She was born directly from Zeus. Thus, Apollo argues, women are not actually needed, they merely serve as the carriers and nurturers of the seed. I obviously found this to be quite ridiculous. Although his words did yield an aphorism. It happens that even before the votes are cast, Athena begins her eulogy of Athenian values. She states that her Acropolis shall forever
be the ground where justice is deliberate.
She mentions a bit of the mythic history of the city. For example, how Theseus combated the Amazonians at the Acropolis. The goddess then says,
"No anarchy, no rule of a single master. Thus, I advise my citizens to govern and to grace, and not to cast fear utterly from your city. What man who fears nothing at all is ever righteous? Such be your just terrors.
So, love of democracy and fear of divinity's retribution. As the voters cast their ballots, Athena proclaims that in the case of a tie, she will vote in favor of Orestes. She basically expresses her agreement with Apollo's argument. In the end, the result is a tie, and thus Orestes is pardoned. Know that in ancient democracies, tied cases would be rare, as there would be many voters, and either way, a vote would then ensue to determine the punishment. So, if the result was tight, the punishment would probably be light. Likewise, if the accuser utterly failed, he was liable to suffer a penalty for bringing a ludicrous lawsuit. Orestes thanks Athena and the city for righteousness and justice. More eulogy of the city. Apollo and Orestes leave the scene, and only the chorus and Athena remain. The Furies complain about the new gods, and an exchange ensues in which Athena assuages, slowly but surely, the dissatisfaction and frustration of the trial losers. I cannot avoid interpreting this as perhaps the last message of the play. The play speaks, by way of analogy, to any possibly dissatisfied accuser. Athena tells the Furies that they should not abandon the city, that they may live in Athens with more peace and secure property rights than any other city. I was gifted quite the aphoristic gem from this section. The chorus of Furies is eventually mended, and they unleash blessings, not curses, on Athens. Then a second chorus arrives. Athena says of these,
By us walk those women whose high privilege it is to guard my image, flower of all the land of Theseus. Let them issue now, grave companies, maidens, wives, elder women, in processional.
I guess this aims to offset some of the sexism previously mentioned. In the end, all are happy in Athens. This ends Aeschylus' trilogy about Orestes. If you missed the other videos, you really should catch them. Likewise, you will like the final analysis and critique video. It contains many more of the aphorisms I crafted from this author. In fact, let me tempt you with a small sample.
Since law that requires fear is nothing more than coercion, God doesn't wish to be feared, but to be agreed with. Shame does not mock anyone more than the vain, for in their misfortunes, these not only hear the laughter of others, but also the laughter of their own past self.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.